back. Well, the US and the UK have carried out joint airstrikes against Houthi rebels in response to a lethal drone attack on a US base in Jordan last week. A spokesman for the Iran-backed group has vowed to continue its campaign of disrupting regional trade, no matter the sacrifices. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Garda. Kosha, thanks for joining us. Look, this is escalating daily. Has Joe Biden lost control of the situation? We're seeing strike after strike, and yet nothing is working to stop this group.
It certainly seems to be reactive in nature, and I guess in fairness to Joe Biden, Danica, we could say that it's reactive to consequences that are really, really downstream from public policy decisions that should have probably been reevaluated over the course of the past couple of decades, well before Biden. So I can tell you back home in the US, people are increasingly questioning why we even have so many bases still all across the Middle East and have our troops be sitting ducks. Or why did global supply chains orient themselves in a way that this region has become such a choke point for so much global trade when we know that it's susceptible to this kind of action and so on and so forth. So there could have been more done upstream, but we are where we are right now. And it certainly seems like a little bit of just a needling here and there, but nothing that's changing the picture overall. And I expect to see this kind of escalation continue.
Yeah, it's certainly a worry, that's for sure. Look, let's move on. It's no surprise that border chaos has erupted under the Biden administration. Take New York, where luxury hotels are being converted into mass-scale migrant shelters. And now New York City officials are launching a $53 million program to hand out prepaid credit cards for migrant families. Kosha, it's no doubt an issue dividing the United States. Will there ever be bipartisan support on solving this crisis?
You know, here's a funny thing, and you put your finger on it. It has long been an issue dividing the United States, but now it's actually become an issue that's unifying. It's one of the few issues that's unifying the constituents, because those things that you mentioned, like the New York City credit cards or hotels being converted, or a school was even sent into homeschooling so that it could be repurposed for a shelter in a deep blue state. It's really unifying the country where they don't want this anymore. And they see, 8 million people pouring in over the last administration as completely unacceptable in terms of how a country could be run. Yet the leaders, the legislators in Congress and in the Senate, both from the left and from the right, just continue to not really meet their constituencies where they want it. And so over there, you see that gridlock and that infighting, even though most of the base of the country, the electorate, wants something done. And it's really interesting to watch. It's really escalating because you have the states suing the feds and all sorts of things are happening on this. I think it's actually turning into the #1 issue in the election.
Well, it's interesting because Donald Trump says that this issue could actually flip traditional blue states. So how do you see this issue impacting the November election?
You know, it's really tough to flip blue states, and we can see that California, after it turned blue, since Ronald Reagan in 1984 never voted red again. But Donald Trump had a little bit of success with that. He did flip Wisconsin after 40 years of Republicans losing the state on similar issues, on the broader topic of immigration, among others. And that whole thing is just now reaching a fever pitch for the reasons we're discussing. So I do think it's going to play in. It's hitting people, at home, in their school districts, at the kitchen table, and that kind of stuff might sort of motivate those swing state voters a little bit. But when push comes to shove, what we're seeing in recent years is the U.S. electorate is just really divided ultimately, and I'm not sure how much that's going to happen, but it is going to play in some shape or form. I just don't know how much.
Speaking of the US election, every week politicians are trying to outdo each other. Sometimes, though, embarrassingly so. Just take a look at Nikki Haley on SNL.
My question is, why won't you debate Nikki Haley?
Oh, my God, it's her, the woman who was in charge of security on January 6th. It's Nancy Pelosi.
For the 100th time, that is not Nancy Pelosi. It is Nikki Haley.
Are you doing okay, Donald? You might need a mental competency test.
Oh, look, Kosha, Nikki's out there testing her skills. Perhaps she can take over from SNL if she loses here. What do you think of this? Realistically, is it actually going to sway voters her way?
No, I think she's in it for just something bigger, just raising the platform, positioning herself for some future position. She knows that. Everybody knows that. She is young. She's 30 years younger than the other two candidates at the front of both parties. So, that's one thing she can play to. But she just doesn't have a natural constituency, again, because the centrists in the general will vote for the Democrat. In general, they're not going to go for her, even if they do in the primary. And in the primary, you can't win a Republican primary only with centrists. You need that core base of Republicans, and they're in love with Trump, and they're not swaying.
Well, that's it. I mean, Trump is increasing his lead over Biden, and he's also revealed his own criteria for the perfect VP. He name-dropped Senator Tim Scott, but also Kristi Noem. Who do you have your money on here?
I don't think it's either of those two. You never know with Trump. It'll be some wild card or somebody that we don't expect potentially, or it'll be a governor, some up-and-comer, I think, that we don't know. I don't think it's one of those two.
All right, well, look, it's fascinating as always. Kosher Garda, good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.